I want to come up with a plan to survive and even thrive societal collapse. I know. Societal collapse, really? Do you like scaremongering much? A UN press release and a plethora of other scientific and supporting papers and articles have explained that in just a short few years we will face the biggest threat modern humans have ever faced. David Attenborough addressed the UN Security Council explaining that if we continue on our current path, we will face the collapse of everything that gives us security. He said food production, access to fresh water, habitable ambient temperature, and the ocean food chain. Please take a moment to listen to his message on YouTube. I'll include a link on the comments. Climate change, the biggest threat modern humans have ever faced. If you really think about that, that sounds kind of bad. The biggest threat modern humans have ever faced. So what? Bigger than World War I, World War II, bigger than Black Death and bubonic plague that ravaged Europe between 1347 and 1351, taking proportionately greater toll of life than any known epidemic or war up to that time. Worse than any war, volcano, earthquake, tsunami, flood, drought, and food crisis we have ever seen. Everyone is making plans for the future, but so often these plans do not match the reality of what we're about to face with climate change. What should our children study for future careers? Maybe they should study how to survive a post-apocalyptic wasteland. We depend on human cooperation for our survival. We are not independent, we are interdependent. We buy food, we get water pumped to us, we are supplied with energy. The police give us our security, the NHS take care of our health needs. In return, we provide our services. What is going to happen when these systems break down because of extreme pressures due to climate change? These pressures are hitting developing countries hard, and it will only get worse for them. But this is global. This is going to hit us hard as well. It won't be just us tutting at the television about how terrible it is for other people. How long will the climate crisis last? The carbon dioxide that we're responsible for putting into our atmosphere will take hundreds of thousands of years to return to pre-industrial levels. Who disagrees with this? No one credible. So when is societal collapse going to happen? What are the chances of societal collapse happening at all? Is it like 80%, 5%, 100%? I don't know, but because we're going to face the biggest threat modern humans have ever faced, and we're not coming close to doing enough about it, it is absolutely justifiable to ask the question of how we're going to survive this. This sounds to me like the end of our comfortable lives. No more summer holidays in the south of France, no more skiing in the Alps, no more drinking coffee, no more eating chocolate. And if societal collapse happens, maybe no more going to the shops to buy food, maybe no more water, no more cancer treatments, no more hip replacements, no more security in a Mad Max future dystopia of survival of the most brutal and cruelest in our dog-eat-dog world. The government has declared a climate emergency, and this climate emergency is described as an existential threat. Existential threat means it's going to kill people. Okay, how many people is it going to kill? I mean, people die now. I don't know. But considering this is being called the biggest threat modern humans have ever faced, I'm guessing, yeah, lots. How bad it becomes truly depends on society's behaviour and reaction. This does not give me much hope either. How well did panic buying go for us during the pandemic and our fuel and goods driver shortage? In time, large expansions of uninhabitable land could affect 30% of projected human population. So, It is not just fighting our neighbours to suck out the juice from their eyeballs. It will be fighting all those who have migrated to escape the uninhabitable parts of the planet. Will they just do the gentlemanly thing, stay and die in their own locations? I wouldn't. Imagine the number of people trying to push their way into our country because of the disasters that the developed world has caused to their countries. I wonder how well we would react. What do you think? Developing countries will welcome migrants in with open arms, saying we're all in this together. Or will we do everything we can to protect our own dwindling resources with violence and killing? So, this really scares me. I have a plan that when I'm too old to be useful to my children, I'm going to end it for myself. So they don't have to struggle to survive. My survival won't make their struggle worse. But aren't you just overreacting? Oh, Jesus Christ, I hope so. If climate change turns out to be entirely manageable, then I won't know anyone happier than me. But if it turns out to be as bad as everyone is predicting, we need a plan. Climate change is now inevitable. I'm suggesting we start talking, investigating, and thinking about our individual and collective protections for the worst that our climate has to throw at us. Let's move on to the point of the video. How can we survive what is to come through local organisation? What if there are sets of disturbances that slows, hinders or stops the normal cooperative apparatus that allows society to function as we're used to it? When I talk about the cooperative apparatus, I'm talking about supply chains, water pipes, transportation infrastructure, road, rail and shipping, fuel, energy supply and communication. Even a small and temporary interruptions in these systems is currently considered a disaster. And we've had small glimmers of what this might look like with the pandemic, fuel shortages and driver shortages. As a result, we have had product scarcity that have led to panic reactions in the population, hoarding goods and which has created deprivation. The panic appears to have made the situation considerably worse. These incidents have shown that the stability that we take for granted is not as secure as we might suppose. Let's insist that local authorities gain advice and develop plans that would come into play in the event of the collapse of normal cooperative apparatus, in consideration to the extreme difficulties that will arise within the next 20 years because of climate change. This would be in the same way that there are local plans for other types of disasters. Could our insistence for this recognition cause an attitude change that will mean societal collapse is less likely? Could a district even become self-sufficient in the event of significant damage to a country's normal operations? My first guess at priority is security. We in the West are not used to the level of suffering that is about to come. We have already seen glimmers of public reactions to emergencies with the pandemic, with fuel shortages and goods delivery driver shortages. But because of panic, what had been a minor inconvenience has become so much worse as people battle for what they fear to be scarce resources. Imagine what it will be like when we're not panicking to buy something to wipe our bottoms with. We are panicking about buying food. Imagine the panic buying when there is not enough food to feed ourselves and our families. It's going to be harder and harder to produce enough food to feed the world's population. By a bit over 2 degrees centigrade, it is likely that the world will lose a third of its food production capacity. When people start to starve in this country, possibly exacerbated because of hoarding, do you think the hoarders will be safe? Even if there is just a suspicion of hidden food? Do you think that we have enough police to stop the ransacking? Do you think a starving police force will even care? How can we guard against harmful panic within our district because of extreme need? Being organised and having a plan might alleviate both panic and extreme need. This might involve rationing and the organisation of mutual aid. I imagine it would require the help of every able-bodied person so that the people involved are not just waiting for aid, but are actively involved in their own well-being and taking care of the well-being of those around them. But what about guarding against violent threats from outside our district? If the district has organised well and has worked hard for its own needs, there will be those desperate enough to take our resources by force, both from within and from those outside our country. Desperate, displaced migrants from other countries will come over as their own lands become uninhabitable, or because they have been pushed out by other warring groups. They would be desperate enough to use any level of force to survive. I'm sure I would. Would desperate people within our country be any less dangerous? Again, locally organising all able-bodied people in the district would be vital for self-protection and our ability to cope with difficult situations. Food. Depending on how long a food crisis lasts, rationing and then local food production would be needed to guard against the worst harm. It might be that our district could not rely on food being imported from other parts of the country. If there is either a fuel or energy crisis, harm to the transportation infrastructure, or inadequate commercial food productions. These scenarios could be caused by a combination of problems. For example, poor harvest, drought and flooding, strong demand for food from a growing population, or storms destroying infrastructure. It might be that we all need to become farmers, a bit like the World War II Dig for Victory strategy. Each household grows their own food, but the skills and resources to achieve this level of self-sufficiency will require time and effort. It looks like there will be ways to do this. I've read about strategies such as with the garden socks that makes any area appropriate for food production. If we become good at growing our own food, that would alleviate current problems of healthy food shortages and increased food costs. Water. Depending on how long a water crisis lasts, rationing and water distribution may become vital. It might be that our district could not rely on water being imported from other parts of the country if there is either a fuel or energy crisis, harm to our water distribution infrastructure, and inadequate commercial water capture capabilities. These scenarios could be caused by a combination of problems. For example, drought, flooding, strong demand for water from a growing population, and storms destroying infrastructure. I need help on this one. This sounds like an engineering problem. As a district, can we capture and protect enough water for the district to become self-sufficient? Would digging wells help? Would we all need to live closer to a water source? Would we need to transport water in carts tens of miles? And energy. What if there is a substantial energy crisis? I can imagine that every person will be cutting down trees in order to cook and keep people warm. I know cutting down trees isn't very green, but who's going to stop someone from cooking and keeping themselves warm? This could be a level of attrition against trees that is unsustainable. If the burning of trees is the only energy supply and it goes unchecked, could we grow enough trees fast enough to replace them? Or can we engineer our way out of the problem? Could we set up our area to be self-sufficient? Surely only with preparation. Enough wind and solar generation to produce power for us, at least during certain parts of the day. Please don't get me wrong. I don't want to distract from efforts to rapidly reduce emissions and environmental harm. Because no matter how bad the situation is, as a species, we have sufficient amounts of selfishness and stupidity to make the situation very much worse. We had a 50-50% chance of avoiding catastrophic climate change by staying under 1.5°C temperature rise. However, each year that passes, it becomes clearer that that ship has sailed. Collectively, the human species has not been willing to do enough to save itself, even though we are well aware of how bad things are going to become. It's not called climate catastrophe because it's going to be fun. The very best scenario given to us by the IPCC in 2021 was that we only had 11 years left until we would reach 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. It is more likely that we'll reach 1.5°C in 9 years, and maybe even as little as 6 years. Let's start thinking what we're going to be doing about that.